Should I come up here next to Jan for a minute? Hello? Okay. Hi, everyone. Most of you heard a little bit about what we were just talking about, but basically, we are the housing committee for Shandaken. We are part of the smart housing movement, and there are official designations around this, which we can get into another time. But basically, we are one of many towns across Ulster County and New York State and the country who are creating these housing committees to address in a formal way affordable housing in our community. And by being part of this network, we have access to toolkits and resources, and I believe at some point when we get enough under our belt in terms of what we're doing and what we've done, and there's a certification process, and I think there's also some funding available for certain projects. So that's how the committee came about. It was sort of born in a different committee called PH2, which is the Pine Hill Phoenicia group that Jan might want to tell you a few words about at some point. So what we've done in the last 18 months, a lot of it's been sort of recon, trying to understand what the community needs, because this is a new committee and none of us have done this work here in this town before. The other thing we've been doing is identifying organizations outside of our town and outside of the town government that we want to work with. In addition to, first I should say, we're doing work with, we're sort of liaisoning with most of the other committees in the town, because a lot of what we want to accomplish will be affected or influenced by other committees, such as planning, zoning, the Climate Action Committee, and the Comprehensive Plan project that's underway right now, of redoing the comp plan for the town, which is, I think, the first time in 20 years, is that right? That it gets updated every, I guess, decade or two, and ours is due. So, and then in addition to that, we had a presentation here in the winter about ADUs. We invited RUPCO to come and speak, along with Kai Farmer from Ulster County Planning. And they gave us a whole spiel on what ADUs are, what it takes to, how they're defined, some funding opportunities, and some different sort of ins and outs that you need to know or learn about if you want to build an ADU. Does everyone know what an ADU is? Accessory dwelling unit, if you want to build like an extra tiny home on your property to house someone. We had a meeting in last April at the Shandaken Inn, where we invited people from the community, business owners, nonprofits, and just anybody else who wanted to come. But we were talking about workforce housing, which is another issue that's big up here. Most restaurants and small businesses have trouble attracting employees because the employees can't find housing in Shandaken. We also did a lot of work this past year and a half with some great results. I think we would agree on the short-term housing, STR laws. There was an STR law, some laws put into place a year or two ago, and what we've done since then is assessed them and how well they've been doing, and then we've managed to work with the town board to put a cap on how many licenses we're issuing. So there's currently now a cap on how many can be issued until we get down to 100. Right now there's 150 licenses, and this is, by the way, only for non-resident STR owners. Anybody who's a resident of Shandaken and has an STR or wants to have an STR, the laws are not as strict. But for what we're trying to prevent is people buying properties in the town who don't live here and are not part of the community, and they're just running them like Airbnbs. I guess that's most of what we've done so far. Anything else I'm forgetting? Okay. This winter, one of the things we're going to work on is there's a grant that exists that's being given out through RUPCO and the town and Ulster County for people to apply for grants to build ADUs on their properties. And Shandaken was omitted from the towns that can apply for this year. And so we found out that's because we don't have very friendly ADU laws in this town. So we decided for this winter we're going to try to work more closely with the zoning and planning boards to try to address some of those issues and try to make the path to building an ADU a little bit smoother and easier and less arduous for the people who live here. That's it. I should introduce you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jan Jaffe, and I am one of 20 investors in a project in Pine Hill at 310 Main Street. Are you all familiar with the building? This is a picture of the building. Can you see that? So it's sort of an anchor property on Main Street. It was built in 1880. It's on the National Register. It wasn't one of the great hotels of the Catskills, but it was certainly a good enough hotel. And it was very popular. It had a livery. It had a bowling alley in the basement. It had 152 rooms originally. And it had a cafe that went over the Alton Creek. And so the creek is part of the property. It's been derelict for quite a long time. And some of you might remember what it looked like before we acquired it. If anyone wants to say a few words about what that was like, does anybody remember? You want to just throw out some words? Scary, haunted, crowded. It was a junkyard. Yeah. And so it was a real eyesore. It's right on Main Street. It really is our anchor property. And when it went up for sale, we just put a word out in the community to say if anyone was interested in trying to buy it. And we held a meeting, and about 25 people showed up, and we talked about whether we could buy it together. And 20 of the people said, yeah, let's make it happen. And I think that's pretty extraordinary. And everybody put in various amounts. Some people put in very small amounts. A couple people put in larger amounts. We decided we had to get control of this property because without control, we would just be fighting the next person who got it and wanted to do something really goofy with it. And we knew it needed a lot of work, and it was going to be a hard project to develop. So we bought the property as a limited liability corporation and called ourselves the Wellington Blueberry LLC. Wellington was the property was called Ulster Park originally. Linda, you might remember that. And then it became the Wellington. And then as it was down in its heels, there were some jokes about turning it into the Blueberry Bar. So that's how we got the name Wellington Blueberry. So I thought I was really intrigued by this invitation to talk about this. It really forced me to think about this process. We bought the property in December of 2022. And I think I'm going to create a alphabet book for people who want to develop properties. And this is my first attempt at it. So A is for acquisition and governance. So we acquired the property as an LLC. We had a lot of discussion about whether to be a nonprofit or to be a for-profit. We decided to be a for-profit entity, mainly because we could do it more quickly. And then also we thought perhaps we could get a return on our investment. We became, as an LLC, everyone has shares in the corporation, but there's a board, and there's 5 women who are on the board, and the members have given us a lot of latitude to move with the property. So we can move very quickly, we can make things happen. So A is for acquisition, it's also, and governance. It's important to really think about how you're going to govern as a group. And so 5 people, we meet every week, on Mondays. I just came from a board meeting. We divide up our tasks. I'm the president of the board. And we try to like sort of delegate to each other different things that need to be done. B is for beginning the pre-development process. That's something people don't talk about very much. Before you can develop the property, there's just a lot that has to happen. And so I'm actually going to turn this around because these are my notes. It's really cute. So I'll put it up here so everyone can see it. It looks like a house. See, it's got a little roof and then all these building blocks and then little flowers at the bottom for all these things. But the reality is that it's much more like this. You're just constantly juggling things. When you're a developer, that's all you're doing, is you're juggling A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So B is beginning the development. It's okay. Yeah, sure. Why not? So we had to hire a structural engineer to take a look at the property. We had to hire a civil engineer to do a survey of the property. This is why I wanted you all together close. So feel free to jump up and look at this. Then we hired 30-foot dumpsters to start to just take a few things out of the property so that we could get to the walls, and we filled them, and I'll talk to you in a minute about how we filled them. And then we created a scope of work. We started to get ideas about what we wanted to do with the property, and we had a couple. One was we would tear it down and turn it into a park. Another one was that we would try to create a unique hotel where one floor was sort of a traditional hotel and the other floor was for seasonal workers. And the ground floor would be a market with groceries and other retail activities. We started socializing those ideas with lots of people. It was amazing. Hotel owners came to talk to us. They just said they heard about it and they'd come over, and we talked to everybody. And as we did, we began to realize that we had too many ideas, that the property needed to be one or maybe two things, but not 3 or 4 things. And we started to settle on the idea of a pretty simple hotel, sort of not a really expensive one, but a decent, nice hotel with a grocery store on the ground floor, because there is no place in Pine Hill to get milk or bread or cheese or any of the basics that you need in life. And we thought that was a real, we wanted to see the community have a marketplace. So that we had that idea, and with that idea we did some concept papers that we put together with drawings and pictures of just the ideas of what we wanted, and we put together a scope of work, and we sent it out to architects that had experience with preservation and who seemed to be kind of practical in the region. We got 8 bids. And we selected an architect. That was really fascinating. We learned so much from that. I really recommend that anybody doing development do a bidding process. We learned so much from people going through the property. It was a shameless robbing of free information. But they knew it and we knew it, and it was really great. We selected an architect in Albany, TRW, Mark Thaler, who does beautiful work. He's really known for his preservation work, but he's very, very practical. He loves to just sort of get in there and start digging around. We loved him the minute we saw him, immediately going into the basement and starting to move things around and try to figure out what was connected to what. So it's been a great relationship. So we hired our architect to do conceptual drawings, and based on our initial idea, and to help us get so that we could get a third-party cost estimate. So those are the pre-development actions. C, that was B. C, create and recreate your business plan. So initially we thought this is a $2 million job, which sounds big. And then we heard back from the structural engineer who gave us the good news that the building was actually in amazingly good shape. And we had known, we did a walkthrough with a couple people before we bought it. But we didn't do a lot because we wanted to buy it. There was some competition around this, and we just wanted to make sure we had control and owned it. So the good news was it was in structurally good shape, and the bad news was that the foundation had to be replaced. This is a 14,000 square foot building, wood building, and it's going to have to be raised and the entire foundation be replaced. That's $1 million. Okay, $3 million. So then we got our conceptual drawings together for the hotel and the grocery store, and we sent them out for estimates. $5 million. Can't believe it. So we got a couple pro bono contractors who said, yep, $5 million. That's just for the rehabilitation of the property. Then you figure another 20% in soft costs. This is a $6 million project. So one of our first lessons is, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And we also, that you have to be adaptable about your business plan. We realized we were not going to be able to finance a hotel on a $6 million job. And we went back to our original idea about seasonal workers, where we really knew there was this demand for housing from people who were in the recreational industry and in the tourist trade. And we decided to reconfigure the property as affordable workforce housing. So we're targeting people in the community who make 80% of the area median income. And we were really excited about that. So excited, the phone started ringing, people were calling from all over. And we also knew that that was going to be something where we could raise funds to do that, that there was more money for housing. So we had to adjust our business plan. That was not easy. You get very attached to a project. So we fell in love with every idea we had, which we should. If you want to do something, you want to fall in love with it. And then we had to kill our darlings. And that was really hard. I know. What was really wonderful is that the 20 people involved said, no, we're going to stick with this. Let's do this. And at this point, we also knew we weren't going to make money on the project. So we are creating a nonprofit organization called Friends of Pine Hill Historic District. It'll be a 501c3. People can make contributions to it. Wellington will be its first project, but we're hoping it will be a community development organization that will try to do more to do affordable housing and commercial development in Pine Hill in the historic district. So that was we had to go off the road and really think about this and say, okay, but that's what we're doing, and we're all committed to it. So ABC, D, do community engagement. Do more community engagement. Do community engagement and state and county engagement. This is so important. And here, you have your heads down, you're doing all this work to make the property happen. You really need to think about the community around you and how are we going to work together. In the case of Pine Hill, it was really extraordinary. People, when we started, there was so much junk, it was a junkyard. There was toxic waste in the yard. There was so much dog poop that people had to take their shoes off and spray them after every cleanup. 40 people would show up on a Saturday or Sunday, just neighbors, and help us fill these dumpsters. It was really incredible. Some of them are in the room here, and really made such a big difference. It was inspiring. It was kind of fun in a weird way. And it was just really important. And in return, we tried to keep the community informed. We have an Instagram account. We have a website. We try to, we go to the PH2 meetings and make announcements about what we're doing. When anything's happening, we try to bring them up at the town board meeting every month. So this means a lot of time and effort on the part of the investors, just saying, okay, we got to make sure everybody knows what's going on. We also had to make sure that the state and the county were engaged with us. And that was a really interesting process of going out to the state and the county and asking them to come here, not just to see the Wellington, as wonderful as it is, but to see Shandaken. And so we teamed up with PH2. We had people from the Economic Development Agency, from the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Corporation come up here. It was the first time they'd ever been here. We gave them tours, not only of our project, but other projects that were going on in both Phoenicia and Pine Hill that were part of the PH2 effort. And that made a big difference. People were really impressed. They had different stories in their head about Shandaken. So that was nice to give them some new information. And we became, we try to be on first name basis with all these people in the state and the county and really understand what they're looking for and what we're doing, because we need them and they need us. And out of that, one of the things that happened is that we were able to get a grant from Restore New York, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So A, B, C, D, E, entitlements from the town. You can't do development unless the town gives you entitlements to do it. This is often a surprise to developers because they own the property and they think, hey, I have the money, I'm ready to go, I have the drawings, what do you mean I need to get code variances? For this project, there was parking, density, open space, and environmental reviews that we need to go through. Parking is a big issue in Shandaken. This building was built before there were cars, so there is no parking. So how do you create parking here? Our code was built before we had concerns about having more density in our communities, so the code requires a lot of parking. So we're in the process right now of talking to the town about what are we going to do. There's a real limit in terms of the land on which we can build parking spaces. And we're not alone in this. This is, I think, a big issue that I hope the Housing Smart Committee is going to champion over time, of we either have parking lots or we have revitalized properties, but we can't have both. So that's an interesting topic, and we can come back to that. So A, B, C, D, E, we're almost done with my little spiel. F. F is really important. It's financing the capital stack. That's what they call it, a capital stack. That means all the money that you have to put together in order to fund the project. So the community put up $550,000. And no, that's the purchase price plus the pre-development costs, or some of the pre-development costs. In addition to that, because of the campaigning we did to get people up here to see Shandaken, we had applied with the town for Restore New York money, which is state money, and we didn't get it the first round. And the second round, Ulster County Economic Development partnered with us to make the application, and we got $1.6 million. Yay! State money, before you get too excited, state money is really interesting. It comes after you've done the work. So we have to, and they won't release any of the money until, you've got all the money together. So it's good we have the 1.6 million. I think it's going to open doors for us, but it's not like we can start working. We've also, one of the things that I think I've learned, the biggest lesson I've learned from so far, is that if you have a small problem, make it bigger. And so our small problem is that this is a tiny little place. It's very hard to attract state or county money. There's not that many people living here. We're not competitive in the population scheme of things. So we decided we would start going after New York Forward money, not just for the Wellington, but for all of Pine Hill. So the town has just submitted its second application for a whole set of things that nonprofits and for-profit developers have put together to improve Pine Hill. Everything from historic lighting to the Smith Park to the historic museum, improving the historic museum and the library, lots of really interesting projects, and the Wellington. So we made ourselves part of something bigger, which makes us more visible on the state level, and it's also good for everybody. So it's well worth it, and it's been a wonderful experience because it's really gotten us all together and really talking to each other about all the things we want to see happen in Pine Hill. So we have a New York Forward grant in for $4.5 million, and $1.5 million of that would go to the Wellington. We have a grant into the Environmental Protection Fund for the foundation, to replace the foundation for $675,000. And because the property is on the National Register, and it is in a historic district, and by the way, everybody in Pine Hill who's in the downtown area is in a historic district, we qualify for historic tax credits for our rehabilitation. So this property has about $2 million in historic tax credits. We just have to find somebody who can use them. So we're shopping around to find somebody who needs about $400,000 a year, who has $400,000 a year in income, passive income, that they could use the tax credits so that they wouldn't have to pay that. There's a whole business around this, and we're learning how to access it. And then we have another $725,000 we'll have to raise, but we get to that point, it's going to be easy. So the financing the capital stack is a really big thing, and I now have learned when people say, "What's your capital stack?" I can roll all these things off, and you will have to do that too. So that's A, B, C, D, E, F. G is get from construction to the C of O, the certificate of occupancy. This was a big lesson for us, is that the deeper we got into this with our architect and with the cost estimates, and we realized that we needed a developer, that we're people with a lot of experience in different parts of real estate, but none of us have ever done anything this big or complicated. So as part of our campaigning, we convinced Rubco to come up and partner with us. Rubco is the premier real estate developer for affordable housing in this region. They've done hundreds and hundreds of units of housing. They do beautiful work. They've done work that's historic, but they don't come up here. It's far away from Kingston. But there was a lot of persistence, and we got the head of Rubco to come up here and take a look at the property and see how wonderful it is, and also see how committed the community was to making something happen, and that was a big part of what made them say they would do this. So they are partnering with us. A lot of people don't understand that Rubco has two arms. One arm is that it helps people get rent supplements who are very low income, and they do a wonderful job with that. And then the other arm is this real estate development arm, and that's the arm that we're working with. So partnering with Rubco has changed our lives. People return my phone calls when I call the state, which is really amazing. And when I tell anybody we're working with Rubco, they're just like, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." And they've been terrific. So I really think that's something that we need to think about as a community, is we need a community developer here. This is something you don't want to do alone. So ABCDFG, H is hiring a property manager, which we will do, and I'm not going to go into it because that's 2026. But I just think that I'm hoping that gives you a sense of what this is like. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it, and I have drawings if you want to see the drawings. And I have some things that I've learned so far that I could tell you, but I'd rather just hear your questions. There's a lot of talking.
Interject. One of the reasons we wanted Jan to come and talk about this process is because as the Housing Committee, we are trying to come up with as many creative ideas as we can to tackle the housing crisis. And one of the things that's come up repeatedly already in the last year and a half for us is that, oh my God, there's a 5-unit property that's about to go up for sale, and then 3 months later someone buys it and turns it into Airbnbs. So, and this is happening, you know, you see places that are sort of falling down in the dumps, and oh, you know, what's happening with that property. So this is just a really great example of a really creative way that they got a hold of a derelict property and are turning it into housing.
Okay, that was a lot of talking. So, do you have a property you're thinking about that you want to? Yes, you have some question or?
When is it supposed to be finished?
Well, our goal is 2026 to finish it by the end of 2026. Yeah, and that's fast. And I think part of why we've been able to do that is our structure of 5 people meeting every week. This isn't a part-time job. We're like very focused. What? It's a full-time job. Yeah, and so it's just been like so it's keeping. I think the thing that's hardest about these kinds of developments is that they're like trying to take a drink from a fire hose, and you just have to be calling people all the time. We're like this little schmepper group, this is a small project. It falls off the radar very quickly, and so you just have to constantly be like, say, when are we going to do this? And also something else that I learned early in my career is that you have to ink in the date that you're going to get going and have things done, and just try to be somewhat maniacal about that. So, and even with the town, the board meetings, the town board has the planning board has certain dates for meeting. You miss that date, you have to wait another month. So you really have to sort of ink in all these dates and just say, okay, we're going to be there on this day, and we'll do everything we can to make that happen. So 2026, we hope to open our doors. You can buy some milk.
I have a question. How representative would you say this and your experience is, for a property that's maybe not historic, maybe not as grand, because even though it's small, compared to a smaller building, maybe, like, how much do you think somebody who's considering a property out there, I'm sure they need to go through this to some extent, like in these steps, but how representative do you think this is?
That's a great question. I'm not completely sure, but I would say that the alphabet holds for everything. This is a complicated project, and so there's no question. $5 million is a lot of money for rehabilitation of a property this size. So a property that was in better shape would not be as complex. And I think this concept of we didn't even know we're actually doing a thing which we didn't know. It's called community-based LLCs. So this is something that people have done in other places, in upstate New York particularly. But much smaller projects, usually commercial, where they're like fixing up a commercial property on a main street, and they immediately have rent cash flow from, rent from retail, and maybe they have some housing on the second floor, something like that. This was a lot to tackle. And it's really tied to one of the things I'd like to say, if it's okay, to editorialize a little bit. I really am kind of passionate about this now. Vacant properties in our village equal death. They are really terrible because they become very expensive to rehabilitate. 10 years ago, this property could have been rehabilitated for $3 million. So it's really a problem. And we all say, oh, it's a vacant property, the owner's having trouble, what can you do? They destroy communities because they are so expensive to develop that it then drives, if anyone is going to develop it, it drives them to doing the things we don't want to have happen, more Airbnbs, that kind of thing. So we really need to do something about it. That we're talking, the town's been great. They've really been very supportive. The planning board's been supportive, the zoning board of appeals has been supportive, but they have a code. And so, they want to make sure that they're not doing something for us that they wouldn't do for somebody else. That has to be fair. Yeah, you want to know what the rules are for on Main Street for parking? There's the rules for new people, and then there's the grandfathered rules. That's the other problem, is that everybody on Main Street who already has a property doesn't really have any rules to follow. But if you come in and you're doing a new development, then you have the code, and the code says that you need 1.5 parking spots for every unit in your apartment building. You need 1.5 parking spots for each unit that you have, each housing unit. Yeah.
Not for someone coming up and using the grocery store.
For a grocery store, I think, and I'm not positive, we've gone back and forth about this, but I think there's a certain number of parking spots you have to have for the grocery store as well. And I think it's either 3 or 6, I'm not sure which. But when you have 10 units we're putting in 10 units of housing and a grocery store, but there's no way that we can get 20 units of parking on that lot. And we have a municipal parking lot that is underutilized most of the time. But when it's on the weekends, if there's an event, it's crowded. And as a town, we're not used to having car crowds because we don't have much commercial development, but we're trying to encourage commercial development. So we have another project that PH2 has been doing in Pine Hill to encourage people who have commercial properties to get funds to rehabilitate them so that we can get some stores in Pine Hill, which everybody wants, but stores create traffic. And so the town it's public knowledge, the town is looking at another piece of land that it might develop as a parking lot at the end of Main Street that the Bottini fuel people want to give to the town, or are proposing they would give to the town. So that might help alleviate some of the parking. But there's no question, if we have more density, we're going to have more cars, and we'll have to get used to that. We're not going to build a parking garage.
Do you have the parking spots on site?
Yes. So we can't. There's just no place to put them. And we're not alone on this, so everybody who's looking at developing their property is going to have the same problem. So, but the town is really thinking about it with us, and the good news. This is a nice problem to have. You have new people in the community. You have stores that we badly need. It's nice to have the problem of cars. as opposed to just having a lot of empty parking lots. And a lot of towns now are actually just suspending parking requirements. Kingston no longer requires a developer to build parking. And a lot of smaller towns do the same, because it's just, you either have parking lots or you have development, but you can't have both. So, I guess I'd say one other thing about this, which is tied to the parking. It's about another G besides get from construction to C of O is grief. Doing these projects means that the community is changing. It's going to have more people. It's going to have a grocery store. Grocery store means more cars, more traffic. There's a certain amount of grief that everybody feels when things change, even if they're changing for the better. You're just giving up what you're used to. And so that's part of why community engagement is so important, is that we talk about it, we think about it, but it's inevitable. I mean, you have change. You're sad about what was before. So, yeah.
I'm just going to use this to make Joyce happy. My question, when I first heard about the Wellington at the beginning of last year, the thing that shocked me the most was that it was a bunch of neighbors got together. Which means, A, do you trust each other with money? How do you deal with volunteerism? Because it's not always reliable in terms of labor. And I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit about the human dynamic of within the group, and also how everybody reacted when you realized you're not going to get a return on investment, and are you even going to get your money back?
Yeah, those are all good questions. I've been amazed at how civil the whole process has been, and I think there were two reasons for that. One is that we all felt passionately, strongly, that if we didn't fix this property up or tear it down, nothing was going to happen on Main Street. It was just, it's too big, it's just too depressing. So that was a really big item. I think people gave based on what they could afford. So nobody gave more money. It wasn't in a situation where they were putting money out that they needed for basic necessities. Everybody liked the idea of having the five of us run this with the understanding that they could vote us out after 2 years if they wanted. So far, nobody's been willing to do that. We do a lot of communication with the investors, just sending them notes. We have one meeting every month. We just say, please just come and sit in if you want. I think that the turning point of moving from a hotel to housing was tough. That was because the drawings were beautiful. The hotel was really cute. And it was hard to let go of that. And some people particularly had a hard time with that. But everybody has come around. And no, I think it was just the vision. The return on investment hasn't been easy. I mean, we all hoped that we would get something back from it. And we are now, the way we have it structured now, we're building the principle that everybody put in. We hope over time they'll get back, either in one of two ways. Through the nonprofit, they can contribute their investment to the nonprofit, so they would get a charitable deduction. They wouldn't get as much money back. Or then they could do that as soon as we form the nonprofit. Or they can get it back over time. We'll return the principal through the cash flow. And we've built that, we've worked that out with the developer, that's built into the budget so far. And I think, just to your point, I think part of why it's also worked is there's been a lot of candor. People have been really straight with each other. So when they were unhappy with something, they said so. And we were able to talk things through. And so that made a big difference. But it's interesting. I think I've talked to people further upstate who have these community-based LLCs, and they all say it works out pretty well.
I feel like people go in giving the amount of investment they can afford to lose. Is that sort of the
Yeah.
mindset?
Yeah. So some of them were relatively small numbers, and some of them were much bigger numbers, but were really, and some people said to us, I'm putting this in, don't come back to me. And we didn't. So it was a real range of relationships. But I want to say the marathon thing too is an issue. It's really hard to stay in the game for so long. I mean, we were really riding high in January of 2023. It's challenging to still feel like, okay, yeah, we're going to be there. Ribbon cutting 26, yeah. But so far, people have been able to do that. Yeah.
It's challenging. However,
The microphone is running around the room. Too bad.
it's challenging. It's challenging. However, for anybody who knows what the building looked like and the condition that it was in when this whole thing started, we live right around the corner from the building, and I am so impressed with everything that's going on with this building, including the cleanup. It was actually, you said that it was fun. It's hard to say it, but it was joyous. Being there, getting rid of all the crap, going into, I don't even want to call it a basement, it was a cellar. Okay, and it had such unbelievable crap in the cellar. Sometimes it took 2 or 3 people to carry things out together. Getting rid of all of the toxic stuff that was down there. The way it looks now is so beautiful. The grounds on the left side of the building were just awful, as Gil said. It was a junkyard. And getting rid of all of that stuff, when you go by this building now, you look at it, the porch is clean, the porch is nice, it's inviting. You look at this now and you say, wow, look at this beautiful building. I'm impressed with all of this, with your alphabet, with all of the work that's been done. I'm so impressed with you as the leader. You're amazing with your team. And the fact that there's 5 women and you're all getting along, that's the best. That's the best.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks. Yeah, I don't want this to be like a discouragement. I think there's really something, we can help each other do this. And now that we've had this experience, maybe we can help somebody else who wants to try to make something happen.
Well, and yes, just to echo that sentiment, I mean, I think it's like an incredible testament to your leadership. I know you've put so much time and labor into this, and everybody who's involved, like having the patience to work through all of these phases of the project, and certainly there's things ahead, but what you've outlined here, I think, helps to strengthen the argument of the need for the community housing development organization, and just how baked into that type of framework these steps would be. And like, you're pioneering by going through it and figuring it out as you go, but I think not everybody has your stamina and skills, and so I think what it highlights to me even more, and we've talked about this before, but even more so understanding is just how essential something like that would be for our town, to be able to take several properties in several different locations and embark on a bigger, town-wide revitalization, which we know is needed, because if we can't build on a new property, then we need to work with the existing ones that we have.
I think this lesson about if you have a small problem, the solution is to make it bigger, is really important for us in Shandaken. And I think it might go beyond Shandaken. I think there's an opportunity to talk to Middletown and really say, we have similar housing problems. We need to expand. We need a community development agency here. The MARC project is working in Delaware County. I think they might be interested in Ulster County. Rubco's too far away from us, and they need bigger projects. Part of the problem is that it takes as much energy, to Sophie's point. I mean, I have spent as much time on this 10-unit and grocery store as I would if it was 100 units. So if you're a nonprofit organization or a for-profit developer, do you want to do 100 units or do you want to do 10 units? It's like a no-brainer. So we need an agency that says, yeah, we're all about 10 units, because that's what these communities need. They can't, we can't absorb 100 units.
What conversations do you think we need to have with, for instance, MARC project to move that needle? Like what, because I know they've worked with you a little bit, but like what would it take for them to adopt us into their
I
scope?
think the Housing Smart Committee should invite Peg and her team here and say, we'd like to talk about how we could work together. I think she may be looking for an invitation. There's always a wariness about looking like you're trying to go into someone else's territory. So being invited would probably help. I mean, certainly the conversation could take place with Rubco as well, and should. I think it would be good to ask Kevin O'Connor, what would it take for you to be in Western Shandaken? But Western Ulster, rather. But I think that's a harder nut to crack because of their, the way they're organized as a business. So, although I'm hoping that by their doing this work with us, they're going to say, oh, well, maybe we could do another one. But, yeah. Would you?
So, I know you've been having a lot of conversations with the community, and do you sense there's an evolving understanding of what housing that's affordable means? And, yeah.
No. Yeah, I think this is a really important conversation. There's a lot of myths about affordable housing. Some of them are now swirling around about the Wellington, and a lot of misunderstanding about who are people who need housing, and also I think we need to flip the frame on this conversation. This town needs young people. We're not going to survive if we don't have some young people. We certainly need to take care of our seniors. We need to have things that we do for seniors. But if we don't start making housing available to people who see this as the way Linda saw this place, as a 40-year investment, where are we going to be? So who's going to be volunteering at the fire department? Not me. And I think, so we need to turn this around and say, we need people in our community who are here for the long term and who are just starting out, setting out, creating their own, life path. And we need to make that possible for them. And then I'll just say one other thing. I'm sorry, I feel very passionate about this. For the New York Forward grant, we asked, we reached out to the bigger resorts in the area and asked them if they would write letters supporting Pine Hill. We got some of the most beautiful letters. I mean, really incredible. And particularly one from Full Moon, I always wanted to call it half moon, full moon, and they just said how, finding housing for their workers is like their number one issue. And they've always scratched their head about why can't Pine Hill be a place where people can live? And it's perfect. And also, this is the last thing, is that Pine Hill, as opposed to any of our other hamlets, has a wastewater treatment plant. You cannot do development without a wastewater treatment plant. You cannot put in new stores without a wastewater treatment plant. We have an amazing asset that we are underutilizing.
I have a couple of questions and thoughts, but I'll try and keep it brief. Just specifically to RUPCO and the question of why would somebody from outside be interested in here? Kingston is not so far, and in fact, we're talking about the shortage of seasonal workers and workers in the tourist industry here. Those folks are commuting from Kingston, which of course drives demand in Kingston and keeps housing scarce and expensive there. So I think that if you could demonstrate that these things are related, that then maybe there would be more interest from folks like RUPCO in helping development efforts here. I guess my next question was sort of related to some of the other conversation. You mentioned that some folks in your group came with some expertise or experience in real estate. And I wondered if you could speak to sort of what that experience was and what experience you think would be needed for others to try and embark on something similar.
Yeah, so the group, I'll answer that one and then just one quick RUPCO reflection. The group includes the owners of the Bel Air Lodge. So they have had a lot of experience in small-scale development, but the lodge is actually a moderately sized commercial development. Chandra Valiente, who is the liaison to the Ulster County Planning Board and for the town, and also has done some development in Kingston and in Pine Hill. Shelley Smith, who's an architect, a professor of preservation materials, who's based in Pine Hill. And Katja Blitzman, who does big data analysis. And that's very useful, actually. And has an Airbnb that she manages. And so, everybody has little bits and pieces. I used to do investing for the Ford Foundation in affordable housing. So that means I don't know anything. I'm just I don't know anything about development. I'm just like the lender. So, and that was a long time ago. But I had a lot of contacts. And that was the other thing that made this possible, is that I was able to get people who were retired developers who I had worked with 30 years ago to just give me free advice to get us started. That's how I got the alphabet. That's how I got, if you have a small problem, make it bigger. That's how I got Jan. It's all about juggling. But there were these bits and pieces. Enough to know that we didn't know enough. That was really, I think some of these, in upstate New York, this group, Insight Architects, do you know them? They're really interesting group. They did our Main Street project that we did for in Pine Hill, Main Street Technical Assistance Project. They have done a lot of community-based LLCs, and they manage them. They have an arm, the architecture firm has an arm that manages it. But in essence, they're like a community development organization. So if we had a community development organization, it could take a group of people who bought a building and guide them through this process. Back to RUPCO, I think really the main problem is 10 units versus 100 units. So you can't even get, for instance, if you want to get low, the gold standard for subsidies is the low-income housing tax credit. And you can't even apply for it if you're doing less than 40 units. There just aren't, we're not going to do 40 units here. And I mean, I think this is something we need to go to the state and say, this is not, this is rural. And it's not scenery, it's people. So we really need to do some campaigning around that. But I think with some guidance, a group of people could do a smaller project than this, definitely. So I'm gonna give it.
So I'm Ro, and I'm a back office employee in the Wellington project. And I would just like to share that, none of us are really experts, but I think the thing that was so important has been kind of this willingness to be open and not to kind of believe the old boy myths about, well, you can't talk to him unless you know him, and can't talk to him unless you've done this. If you're really just generally open and friendly and persistent, all of these people that you think will never talk to you, and sometimes they become quite friendly with you. And that's been true from the local level up through the state level. And that's been very impressive to see that, how really kind of like, even if you're an amateur, but you're willing to kind of self-educate yourself, admit that you're an amateur, and seek help, there's a lot of people that actually will help you. So that's been, I think, from the back office perspective, that's been very fulfilling to see that.
I would just really, and I think this issue of vacant properties is the scourge of Shandaken. And doing an inventory, getting some money to do an inventory of vacant properties as a start, and I know you've done a little bit of this, of documenting ways to help people who have vacant properties either let go of them, give up their fantasy that they're going to get $1 million and retire to Florida, tell them Florida's gone. Or help them fix them up if that's really what they want to do, is really critical, because every year that a property's vacant, it's another $100,000 of rehabilitation money for the next person.
Yes, and we have discussed that with the comprehensive plan consultants, that's been our top priority. We've requested the county to help us with it. It's slow going, but yes, we recognize that that's where there's a lot of potential, and we want to not see all of that just get bulldozed and, I don't know, might get bought out by some other agency. But yes, I saw hands.
I want to echo that also. The comprehensive plan that's undergoing right now is a fabulous opportunity. It's actually something that's supposed to be updated every 5 years, and it impacts how funding comes to the county or to our township. And it's ongoing now. So I'm on the liaison committee for the project, the comp planning, whatever it's called. So I'm trying to, at least in Chichester, I volunteered to be the host, to bring in my community, to have these conversations, and to really begin to look around and see how we can evolve and bring, a consensus to where we want to go. So I highly urge, if anyone else is in another community, if you want to volunteer to be that point person within the planning process, please seek them out. Seek me out, whatever. I'm very happy to help connect people.
And so just on that note, we are actually in conversation now with Patterns for Progress, and we are going to set up a meeting. Patterns for Progress is the consultant that we were awarded as part of a grant we received to redo the comp plan, and they are, expert, urban planners and all this other stuff. So they're going to guide us through this 18-month project as the comp plan, and then they've invited us as the housing committee to meet with them specifically to talk about housing within the comp plan. So absolutely, and we're very excited to work with them because we also hope, as you were saying, that they will help us develop some data around, for example, buildings that are vacant, buildings that are in tax arrears, and then we can start to do some community outreach to the neighbors and see what people's situations are and if there's a way we can intervene and help them, whether it's sell or rehab.
Thank you. So I am a realtor. I live in Phoenicia and I work in Margaretville, so I'm through the corridor constantly. And my days are spent with people who live in Brooklyn who want to rehab homes. They come up here and they fall in love with an old home, and they're, I've got like 5 couples I'm working with right now, and like the wife is an architect or whatever different combination, and they have, to connect all the dots for them is the problem. If you're not living here full time and you want to do this rehab, it's going to take some time, and who can I work with? And, and they're willing to hire people, but there's no one to hire to do the work. So it's the chicken egg thing that we see constantly, but I can tell you for sure there are a ton of downstaters who want to lovingly restore a home for all good purpose, and there's got to be a way to connect the dots, because there's that whole market of people who can't afford to buy in the 5 boroughs. They just can't, right? So they're continuing to rent their apartments, and they're saying, let's take our money and plunk it upstate and take these properties and improve them. So I'd love to be a part of, just figuring out what the solutions are and how we can connect those dots too, because there's that money is there from people who are earning good salaries, and they want to come up here and have the life that we all love up here. So just wanted to throw that in.
Okay, it's 5 after 5.
5 after 8.
Well, see, it's that late. I can't even read the clock. But I think this was really helpful and informative, and thank you to the film crew for making it available for people to watch later, because I think, hopefully that's a tool for you as well, but for us and the community, we look forward to sharing it and making more people aware of the work that you're doing. And thank you everybody for coming, and in whatever way you did or didn't know about this beforehand, we appreciate you being here. And Vicki, Sarah, and I are official members of the Housing Smart Task Force. Deb is a soon-to-be, and then Phil Monas, who's not here tonight, is also a member of the committee, so if anything, please contact us.
And if you want to take a look at the drawings, they're
Oh,
there.
yes.
And Jan, do you have anything you want to say to us in terms of things we can do to help your journey?
Wow.
Or you can get back to us.
If you have $4.6 million, we're done. I'll definitely, thank you. I'll think about that. Yeah, I think working with you just to see us get a community development agency in this area would be the greatest gift I can imagine. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
No, I'm Deb Dolan. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I know Phyllis, though. Yeah.